All right, guys, we will go ahead and get started. Hope y'all had a good weekend. Hope games went well and everything. School's going well. I know we're getting into it. Like 3 weeks in now, I think, for us in DPS. So, hope you're managing everything okay. Part of the goal stuff that we set, I mentioned, what are all the things that are within your control that you can set goals toward, or that you can kind of create those mini steps toward your larger goal. And as school's getting back in, you guys are coming off the summer where it was just baseball, and school's kind of coming back. Remember to manage yourself. Remember to make sure you're getting enough sleep. You're eating what you need to. You're getting enough food throughout the day, so you're not just exhausted at the end of the day when you've got practice or throwing bullpens or whatever. So just make sure you're managing that stuff. If you need any help with that, obviously you can talk to me. You can talk to any of the coaches in the Rogue staff, and all of us can probably help you out in a similar way. So just be aware of that. What I want to talk about tonight is this idea of attention. I don't know how many of you think about where your attention goes throughout the day, or what kind of role attention plays. But there's kind of some aspects of attention that I want to talk about. And there's been a lot of research over, probably the last 100 years in terms of psychological research, but just in general, biological or research just interested in attention, that shows that our attention isn't as good as we like to think that it is. I'm sure a lot of you think, or maybe even pride yourself on your ability to multitask. Multitask is a bit of a skill, but it's a lot more limited than what we traditionally think. So I'll tell you how your attention works. Neurologically, your brain can only focus on one thing at a time. So think about all the information that you have coming in at any given moment, any point of the day. You've got all of this information from your senses that's bombarding your brain. So you've got tons of visual information, auditory information, kind of sensory information internally and externally. So like if you're sore or you're hungry or you have a headache, or there's some kind of emotional feeling that you have in any given moment, all of that stuff is being processed by your brain. And your brain is really, really powerful, but it's also not unlimited. We don't have an unlimited ability to process all of that information. So the vast majority of that never actually gets to our conscious awareness. Like if I turned off my screen right now and I asked you what color shirt I was wearing, most of you probably wouldn't even know, even though you've been looking at me, right? Some of you might, but a lot of you wouldn't, because it's not something that's directly like you're paying attention to. So your brain processes it, but within a half a second, 2/3 of a second, if your brain didn't actively recognize and make note of that, it's gone. Like you've forgotten it. And so that becomes really important when we talk about the role that attention plays in performance. Think about on the field, all of the information that you have that your brain is taking in on the field. Situations, what your role is in those situations. You're maybe thinking about things that maybe you shouldn't, previous at bat, previous play, what might happen next, right? You may be focused on your next at bat, whatever it might be. You've got a lot of stuff coming in. You've got instructions from coaches, maybe stuff coming from your parents, communication with teammates. It's a lot, right? And if we're not paying attention to the right things, then that stuff that we're not paying attention to gets lost. And maybe it's the important things that get lost in that. So I'll open it up. Each one of us has our own things that kind of distract us, right? What are some of the things for you that take your attention away from the things that are important, the things that you should be paying attention to? Go ahead, George.
I think the main thing for me is whenever I'm tired, it really makes me struggle.
What is it about being tired that makes you struggle?
It makes me just like not really listen, and then I don't really look as much because I'll like close my eyes.
So what do you think that does with your attention? Like, where does your attention go when you're tired?
I don't really know.
Yeah, maybe you don't know, right? Maybe it's hard to say. Our attention is affected by our fatigue levels. There was so you guys know about daylight savings, right? In the fall or in the spring, we lose an hour, so we spring forward. So you guys have to get up at 7:30 or 7 or 6, whatever time it is for school. When you're waking up that day, or it used to be. So, God, this was probably 10, 15 years ago, maybe. It used to be that the time changed Sunday night into Monday. So every Monday, going into work, people would have to wake up an hour earlier. They found statistically there was about a 20% increase nationwide for all the states that observe daylight savings. Not all of them do, but all the states that do, there was a 20% increase in car accidents on the morning of daylight savings. So the Monday morning after daylight savings. And they found that is people don't adjust their sleep pattern to account for that lost hour. Somebody's trying to get in and it keeps popping up. One sec. Let's see if I can see that. Okay. Hopefully that'll pop up. So there was a 20% increase in car accidents the day after daylight savings, right? Because people would not account for the lost hour of sleep. So instead of 8 hours, they get 7, or 7 hours, they get 6, whatever it is. When we're tired, our ability to control our attention is lessened, right? We get distracted more easily. Our attention span drops, and then all the physical pieces associated with that are reaction time, slows, all that stuff. So, George, when you're tired, it might be that maybe you have less control of where your attention goes. Like you have a harder time maintaining your attention on whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing. And maybe your intention kind of moves internal or something like that. That's a really great example. And you guys probably realize this. I teach first period now. So we start school at 8:20 every day. And this is my first year teaching first period. So I've never taught this early before. And I noticed that my students in first period aren't as engaged. It's a lot easier for them to be distracted. There's more kids like with their head down on the desk or whatever like that. So you probably realize that, like how much being tired affects your ability to concentrate and focus on what's relevant. So that's good. Any other things that affect your attention, or things that your attention goes to that maybe it shouldn't? I know one that always affected me, Keller, I'll get to you in a second. One that always affected me as a player was like a bad call by an umpire. That one, especially as a pitcher, when I was even in high school, even a little bit in college, that would really kind of get me out of my routine, get me out of my zone where I needed to be. Keller, what were you going to say?
What I think is other sports or people doing activities next to the field.
Yeah,
and talking to friends about it, maybe.
Yeah, like the environment around you, right? Other things going on that aren't necessarily relevant to what you're doing. And that's even if it's not other sports, but you can think like fans in the stands, right? Anything, there's a parent out there that's yelling something, maybe not yours, but another parent, or there's something going on in the stands that takes your attention away. Or, yeah, something going on in a different field. Most high school baseball fields, there's the baseball field, the football field, or soccer, or softball, or whatever. Like I know at TJ, we have our baseball field. The football field track is up above, and the softball field's behind the first base dugout. So there's a lot going on in that small area that can be really easy to take your attention away. Any other examples? Bad plays, you strike out and then you take that into the field. In general, the past can be a really big distractor for what we need to do in the present. There's a lot of sayings about how to stay in the present, be where your feet are, be in the moment, all of that stuff that I know I've said before, and some of you have probably heard from other coaches. all that stuff means is that we want to be in the here and now. And when we focus too much on what just happened, it can distract us from what we need to pay attention to make sure we make the play right now. We talk a lot in our program, especially at bats, about our approach, right? We want to be ready to hit from the moment we step in the box. That's not always easy to do. Sometimes you get distracted by your previous at bat, even, or what just happened to the next player, or a play in the field that you thought you should have made that you didn't. You can take those things into the next moment or the next opportunity that you have. And if your attention is too focused on what just happened, then you're missing out on these relevant things that are happening right now. And again, there's so much information right now that you need to pay attention to that it can be really hard to do that because our attention is limited. It's not an infinite. And when our attention is taken into something else, we can be blind to the things that are really important. I think an important skill to learn within this is like how to watch a baseball game when you're not playing. I think one of the hardest things to do, does anyone know offhand, like the general batting average for pinch hitters let's talk at the major league level, because I don't know the stats for any other level. Does anyone have a guess at what the average batting average for pinch hitters across all of Major League Baseball was last year? And any guesses? Go ahead, George.
200?
Under 200. Last year, I think it was 195, which is about like if an everyday player is hitting 195, they're probably not going to be playing very much. And you think about all that goes into being a pinch hitter, right? You haven't been in the game the whole time. So you've been sitting there. If you're pinch hitting, you're probably not coming in until the 6th, 7th, 8th inning, something like that, 9th inning. You're not coming in until late in the game. So you've been sitting around for an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half, not participating in the game. And then all of a sudden you're thrown into a position where you've got to be ready to take in all the information that's going on right now and apply it to your approach and try to do something with it. That's the most difficult thing to do in sports, probably at any level of any sport, is to be a major league pinch hitter. The guys that can do it really well play for a really long time, but most guys don't do it really well. So you don't see like career pinch hitters. Usually the guys that are backups are, past starters who are kind of wearing down, or future players who haven't gotten their opportunity yet. And because it's so difficult to do. So the advantage of being an everyday player or starting a game is you get to engage in all the information that's going on in that game. It's really hard to pay attention to those things when you're not actively engaged with them, when you're not actively participating. So it's hard for you to pay attention. It's hard for guys on the bench to pay attention to what the pitchers are doing to hitters. What's their go-to pitch with 2 strikes? What do they throw 3-1 to make sure they can get a strike, get something in the zone, right? What are they starting guys off with? It's hard to pay attention to that stuff because if you're not in the lineup, then it's not immediately applicable to you. So that's one thing that can really deter our attention, or what we can try to focus our attention to are, we've got to decide what are the things that are immediately important right now. What are the things that are most important that are going to help me be successful right in the moment? And that changes moment to moment. When you're on the bench, it's different. When you're 4 hitters away, it's different than when you're on deck. When you're in the field with no outs, first pitch of the game, it's different than when you're in the field with 2 outs. When you're on the mound, it's different 0-0 than it is 2-1 or 3-2 or 0-2, right? So this information changes from pitch to pitch. And this is why I think baseball is one of the most difficult sports, especially if you're not pitching or hitting. We've talked about this before. As a fielder, if you've had an active game, how many opportunities do you get in the field as a defender if you've had an active game in a 7-inning game? Maybe 5? 5 is a lot, right? If you've had 5 chances, that's a lot. And that's probably just shortstop, maybe center field, maybe second base, right? Middle of the field. If you're on the corner at third, first base gets a little bit more because they're receiving throws, but just balls hit at you. If you get 2 in a game, that's pretty good. And we see 95 in a 7-inning game, 90, 100, 115 pitches, 2 opportunities in those 115 pitches. That's not a lot. And it's very easy for your attention to be distracted because you're not seeing the ball, right? And sometimes you get away with it. But you never know when the ball's going to be hit to you. You never know when you're going to get your opportunity defensively. So you have to be engaged and you have to have your attention in the right place every single pitch of those 115 pitches, which is mentally exhausting. So this is not, I'm not saying this is an easy thing to do, but what can help is thinking about, all right, what are the things that are most important pitch to pitch, right? I need to know who the batter is. I need to know what the situation is. How many runners are on base? How many outs are there? What's the count, right? What did this guy do last time? What are my coaches telling me? What kind of information am I getting from my coaches or my teammates? That's just kind of the basics. And so it can help you to understand how to control your attention if you recognize and you're aware of the things that you need to pay attention to. If you're not aware of what you need to pay attention to, then it doesn't really matter. You're not going to know if you're paying attention to the right things or not. So just as important as that is, what are the things that you don't need to pay attention to? So we talk a lot in sports psychology, this field, about relevant and irrelevant cues. Relevant cues are the things that are important, that are impactful to what's going on right now. Irrelevant cues are the things that are not. So let's spitball this. No matter what the situation is, like, what are things that are relevant to you during the game? What are the things that are relevant that you need to direct your attention to beyond kind of what I've said already? Go ahead, Keller.
I would say the outs, the count, stuff like that.
Yeah, outs and count. What else? Go ahead, George.
I think for me, the main important thing is looking at the pitcher to know, like, for my prep step.
Absolutely.
Be on time.
Yeah, the timing of the pitcher, right? Defensively and offensively as well. You guys may realize, like, when you're in the box, I haven't really paid attention to the pitcher. I don't know when I need to start. I don't know what it looks like. And that's one goal of the pitcher, is to try to disrupt that. So I may take a bigger leg lift or slide step or things like that. So situationally, like, when is he likely to do that? Becomes important as a base stealer too. You're trying to get a jump, you need to get a timing or in anticipation timing of what the pitcher's going to do. So paying attention to the pitcher is probably the most important thing for almost every position on the field. What else? Or what are some things that you shouldn't pay attention to? What are those distractors that maybe they don't affect you, but you know they affect others? What are some of those things that you shouldn't pay attention to? Keller and George have been doing the heavy lifting. See if we can get some other people to chime in. During the pandemic, when we were doing online classes, this was by far the worst part of being a teacher. Is trying to get engagement, and there's just nothing going on, which is fine. It's whatever. So again, I can give you a gamut of things that can distract you. Again, we've talked about parents, umpires, the other team. Sometimes we pay more attention to what the other team is doing than what we need to do, especially if they like to chirp. In terms of our, the public league, city league that we're in, TJ, that's Denver East for us. They like to talk a lot, and it's really easy for us to get engaged with that instead of the things that we're supposed to be doing. For some of you, maybe that's something that helps refine your attention. Maybe you need to do that and talk a little bit. Ideally, not disrespectfully to the other team, but maybe that's something that you need to do to help yourself stay engaged and stay mentally engaged. So that's a personal preference. But again, the whole point of this is to understand how this affects you as a player. What are the things that distract you, right? What are the most important things for you to focus on? You can talk about pregame too. We've talked about routines a little bit. In terms of your pregame routine, where does your attention need to be? Some people need to distract themselves until, 30 minutes before first pitch. Some need 2 hours to stay locked in. That's a very individual thing as well, and something to take account of as you're kind of creating your pregame routine. Same with your pre-pitch routine. There's one big piece of this that I know as a coach, I fall into a lot. So there's been a ton of research in the field of, like, performance, biomechanics, performance, how those relate to each other, about feedback that coaches give. What's a common piece of feedback when you're in the field, at bat, on the mound, whatever, and something goes wrong? What's a common thing that you hear from coaches, parents, teammates? Let's say you swing through a fastball. What's something that's really common that you might hear as like a point of feedback to help correct something? No, not going to happen. So one thing that I hear a lot as a coach is, hey, keep your eye on it, right? Or keep your head in. That kind of feedback creates an internal focus. Internal focus is not always bad. We want an internal focus when we're learning skills. But once we feel like we've got our skills somewhat mastered, again, mastery is kind of relevant here, or relative here. But when you feel like you're comfortable within your mechanics, we don't want to think internally. What research shows is that when we have our attention, our focus internally, what our body's doing, our movements become more mechanical. They become more robotic and less fluid, more jerky, which is not what we want. The other thing is, if we're focusing internal, what are we not able to focus on? External. Because our brain can only focus on one thing at a time. So if I'm focused on like what my body's doing or how I physically feel when I'm trying to track the ball, I'm splitting my attention. So I'm like going back and forth, which is not good. So one thing that coaches, and you know, I work with coaches from time to time, but I try to really emphasize to our coaches on the staff at TJ is when we're in practice, internal feedback is okay. But when we're in games, we try to keep our guys external. We try to keep them thinking external. And what that means is like, what do I want this ball to do? So one of our cues with our pitchers is, instead of like, hey, get your arm up or stay through it or something like that, we talk about like, throw it through the catcher, spin it through the mitt, right? It keeps our mind on focusing what we want the ball to do externally. As a hitter, it's stay above the ball, right? We're still focusing on what we're doing in relation to the ball. See yourself hitting a line drive over second base or whatever, you know, that kind of stuff. Try to hit a ground ball if we're popping everything up. We want our feedback to stay external because that allows our attention to stay external. Because that's what we, like in a competition, in a competitive setting, everything that we do is related to what's outside of us. If we think too much internally, we lose the external. So now, like if I'm thinking about where my feet are or what my glove is doing on a ground ball, I'm not paying attention to the hops of the ball, and I'm not paying attention to how I need to attack it. Or what do I need to go charge this and get a short hop? Do I need to create a steeper angle so I can give myself a long hop? Like that kind of thing. We're not focused on that. I'm focused on what my feet are doing, what my glove is doing, and I'm not really fully paying attention to the ball, which is probably going to increase an error, my likelihood for an error, which then may increase my focus on my internal state or what I'm doing mechanically. So that's a really common one that people don't even think about, right? We think that, oh, if I swing and miss, like it was a mechanical thing, I need to fix something within my swing. That might be the case, but the more likely thing that's going to cause you to fix that is to think about what you want to happen to the ball, or focusing on how you're going to hit the ball and what it's going to do off the bat rather than trying to fix something internally. That's a game-specific thing. Practice, when we're more of a closed, structured setting, internal feedback is fine. Thinking internally is more acceptable then, because there are sometimes things we need to do mechanically to get us to where we want to be. But we want to do that in a very closed setting. T-work, front toss, machine maybe, something where we know what's coming and we can focus purely on what we're doing. In a game, we don't know that a fastball is coming, or we can't ask the pitcher, hey, you know, make sure you give me a fastball here on the outer half because I'm working on this thing with my swing. It doesn't work that way. You can't do that. So again, the reason I bring all of this up is it's not something that players think, especially younger players, think about too much. Like, what am I focusing on? What am I paying attention to? It's something that's a good skill to build. And again, the off season is a time to do this, right? What do I need to do to get my attention to be where I need it to be? What kind of cues can I tell myself to stay external? You can set up situations like in BP or when you're throwing a bullpen. create a situation, put a batter in the box and compete and like try to strike the guy out, try to get the guy out. And then how can I set myself externally to execute the pitches that I want to after I've practiced these kind of internal things? So the fortunate thing about this is that you can practice controlling your attention. The biggest detriment to our ability to control our attention are our phones. Phones are designed to give you a constant loop of feedback every 10, 15 seconds. It destroys our ability to pay attention for longer periods of time. So you can combat that, one, by getting off your phone a little bit more, staying away from social media a little bit more. And you can train yourself to focus your attention for 5-10 minutes at a time. Start to expand your ability to control your attention. Be aware of when your attention is being distracted, like when you're losing control of your attention. Be aware of that. Be willing to be honest with yourself and then give yourself something to refocus. We talked about self-talk last week. Paying attention to your self-talk is a tough thing to do, but you can train yourself to do that. But you have to be engaged with it. It has to be an effortful thing. It has to be an intentional thing. It's not just going to happen. And more people are struggling with the ability to control their attention because all of the things that life is designed to take our attention away, to grab our attention. So a good thing to do is when you're sitting around watching TV, focus on things to pay attention to. Try to control, I don't know, whatever it is around the room. Pay attention, like what color was the shirt of that character? What did somebody just say in the background, right? Can I take myself away, focus on something else for a couple minutes, and then bring it back and redirect my attention where it needs to be? Because that's another piece of controlling where our attention goes. It's going to be distracted sometimes, and that's normal. In a 2-hour baseball game, you're not going to be locked in every second of every second of that game. It's normal for it. So train yourself to be able to kind of relax your attention, get it away from something, but then bring it back when you need to. What questions do y'all have around this? What issues have you experienced with your attention? I know Ryan just brought in the kind of the journal stuff, the reflective journals after practices and games. One of the questions in there is focusing on your attention. Was I able to maintain my attention? Was I able to direct my focus on the things that I needed to, whatever was relevant at the time? Kind of takes it and encapsulates or looks at it as a whole in terms of a whole game or a whole practice. But that's good reflection on it. Like you don't know where your attention's going until you start focusing on it. You start recognizing it. So pay attention to where your attention is going throughout these games, throughout these practices. When you're hitting in the cage, the cage work is a really good practice for it because it does at least the attention component or the timing component relates a lot to a game, right? You're going to get more swings in a cage setting than you would in a single at bat, but you can take each round in the cage as an at bat, or you can set yourself up like within the cage round of setting up miniature at bats within that. How well can you redirect your attention? How well can you stay external sometimes when you know that you're not working on a specific thing, right? Maybe that round you're working on focusing just on how I want to hit the ball and where I want the ball to go, what kind of ball flight I want off the bat. And that can kind of organize your body in the way that you want it to sometimes. So this is a good reflective point. Thinking about, the rest of this fall, where's my attention going? How can I help continue to control it? This is the time to work out those kinks and start getting that practice in for the next, 6 months before the baseball season gets going, before the spring season. This is the time to work on that stuff. All right, that's all I got for you tonight. If y'all have any questions, I'll hang out for a minute. Feel free to send me a message on GroupMe. Otherwise, we'll be back again next Monday.
Thank you.